Okay, if you want to say your name
Okay.
And where you work for.
Yeah, my name is Dodd, I'm Chief Executive of WDH.
Okay, and when about the time did you find that the affordable rent programme wasn't working for you?
Well, I think the affordable rent programme was based on kind of targets to build new properties, get income to be able to subsidise it, and I think that with the increase in rents that's happened, the programme overall for raising rents to affordable rent level is not sustainable and is not necessarily workable. In some instances the affordable rents are actually higher than the target rents, and also the market rents in particular areas like Wakefield.
So could you go into more detail into why the programme isn't working for you? I mean, what makes Wakefield sort of different to sort of other areas in the country that it might work better?
Well, the issue, I think, about affordable rents is the rent increase is pushing people's boundaries of financial ability to pay. And the whole idea was the affordable rents was to stimulate a certain level of new house building starts. Well, the issue is that with welfare reform and other challenges being on the horizon, the affordable rent increases are higher than the target rents, and therefore if they are substantially higher than the target rents and people can't afford the rents at the level that they're at now, then what's the point in continuing with that?
And did you say that there might be a point at which you'll have to lower rents?
No, I said that the point may come. The point may come. So if you want to ask me the question, I'll answer it if you want. Yeah.
Could there be a point where you lower rents? Or the sector lowers rents?
I don't think the new model for rent increases for the next 10 years is sustainable. Rent levels are to such a point that they're actually creating poverty. In some organisations, particularly in the north, then it may be a consideration that rents might have to reduce to certain properties to make sure that we can get people in the properties, because that's all that they can afford to pay. And I think the point is that if more needs to be done on creating jobs so people can get in employment to actually afford the rents, then maybe rents ought to incrementally increase. But I think the model of increasing rents by CPI plus 1% is not sustainable in certainly our part of the world on some properties. I think that in the future we could be considering reducing rents.
Would there be particular properties you would think of reducing rents? Would it be sort of general needs or certain homes that had more supported housing? Or?
Well, I think the issue is that housing providers need to think like organisations like BMW and also like Asda, the food chain, because their basic role is to make sure that their product is as low as possible so more people will buy it. And I think the issue that housing providers, they're putting more into their properties, their services, and obviously that they're increasing rents accordingly. And I think the issue is that people have got to consider whether or not the increase in rents are sustainable. And if they're not, then what are they going to do about it? And I think that is a real issue and an issue for debate.
Will you be taking part in the current HCA programme? And what factors will you be taking into account when you do?
Well, I think the issue about the HCA programme is the level of grant that we'll get for the properties that we'll build, and also the fact whether or not we can afford it with the challenge that potentially welfare reform may bring on us. So I think it's more about a financial calculation and whether or not the standards that we're having to build to are a bit excessive, therefore increasing your build costs, and whether or not there's another option that can actually reduce your build costs and reduce your price and it make it affordable to meet the housing supply that the country needs.
And what sort of things would you take into account that would lower those build costs?
Well, just generally the space standards that for example, you can build to lifetime homes, but why should we put an infrastructure in a ground stair WC on a 3-bedroom property which might never actually materialise? And I know it's trying to build for the future, but there are costs associated with that, and I think it's a challenge. If there's the need to meet housing supply, that's one kind of cost. If there's a need to meet homes for the future, that's another cost. So I think associations are going to have to weigh up whether or not they're going to build to appropriate standards to get the grant, or alternatively the standards are going to reduce so you can increase more properties because they're actually maybe cheaper to build.